Our first speakers here, we have Ed Juline. And Ed Juline has spent the last 3 years working at the Bitcoin conferences at Mara and Strategy, and he bought his first Bitcoin back in 2011. Hopefully you didn't spend it all on socks. And then we also have Vijay Boyapati. Vijay has been a thought leader in the Bitcoin space for years and is the author of an excellent book called The Bullish Case for Bitcoin. And Vijay is currently working on being a dad, as well as working on the second edition of The Bullish Case for Bitcoin, which we will expectantly wait for. And thank you very much, gentlemen. And the mics are yours.
Awesome. Check, check. Well, welcome, welcome. I will give a disclaimer that when people have been in Bitcoin long enough, they tend to ramble. They don't make any sense. They can't get to a point. That's going to be us. So this is going to be about a 35-minute discussion, 10 minutes of questions at the end. We're going to kind of go back and forth on some stuff. We spent probably about 45 minutes to an hour last night prepping, and we're going off into tangents again and again. So try to follow along with what our thought process is. This talk was supposed to be about Bitcoin for beginners, and I said, well, I don't know what Bitcoin for beginners is anymore. Why don't we kind of look into the psychology of where the resistance from the next group is? Anyways, I was in manufacturing for 25 years, including a 4-year stint here in Portland with Gunderson, railcar manufacturer over here on the river. And I thought in 2019, I'm done. I don't have to do this anymore. And I found very creative ways to destroy my stack, right? Including a pizza restaurant and a summer camp startup. And it was just, yeah. So my wife said, you got to get a job. It hurt my stomach to go back into manufacturing. So I found a job with the Bitcoin conference at about half the salary I could have got. But I told my wife, I'm like, should I go for this job or this job? And she goes, you know where you're going. And I said, okay. So I got fortunate to work for Bitcoin conference. Then I got a job with Mara, spent the last 8 months at Strategy. And now I'm moving on to do some stuff with Tim Kotzman on Bitcoin treasuries. We have a conference September 17th in New York, which is going to be amazing. Look it up. That's a little background on me. I read Vijay's paper when it first came out. He was somewhat inspired by a good friend of mine in Atlanta, Mike Casey, who had written a paper on Substack. And admittedly, I never read his book because I thought I read the paper and I was good. So I read the book a few weeks ago, and it was just one of those like, oh my God, how did I not read this? But as I was going through the book, I'm like, God, man, he was dead on. Everything that he talked about in that book, he was dead on. It's a weird book in the sense that, yeah, it was written 4 years ago, 5 years ago, but everything was right about it. And so I highly encourage you to come get a copy from him, get it signed. It is one of the best ones out there. Introduce yourself, and then we'll dive into it.
Well, thank you for the kind introduction, Ed. So my name is Vijay Boyapati. I am a software engineer by training, and you can tell from my accent I am from Australia. I came over here to do a PhD in computer science, but I never started. And I got a job at a small company called Google, and it was a startup at the time. I left Google and I went and did some political campaigning in 2007 for a candidate, Ron Paul, and he was talking about ideas which were really important to me, which is sound money and the US trading with foreign nations rather than interfering with foreign nations. And those were kind of crazy ideas at the time, but seem to have picked up a lot more adherence in the last few years, which I'm very happy about. Unfortunately, his campaign didn't go where I was hoping it would, and I was pretty disillusioned with the political process. So I left and I went back into the kind of tech world. And then, like Ed, in 2011, I came across Bitcoin, and a friend introduced me to it and actually gave me my first Bitcoins, 5 Bitcoins, and I lost all of them because I think at the time, I mean, this is still true. Most people didn't understand what Bitcoin was, and I certainly didn't understand what Bitcoin was. They didn't understand that this is incredibly rare and precious, and when other people figure that out, they're going to want some. And so I was, very lackadaisical about taking care of those 5 Bitcoins. They were on a laptop, and I gave the laptop to my ex-girlfriend, and we broke up. And a few years later, I was like, I better email her and do you still have that laptop? And unfortunately, she lost it in a hotel in Minnesota. So, and you can. She was telling the truth. You can go to the blockchain, and those five bitcoins are sitting there, the same address. They're dead. So I donated 5 bitcoins to all of you Bitcoin holders. So you're welcome. So that's kind of my Bitcoin story. Then I tried to understand Bitcoin. Like, why does this have value? Which I think is the most interesting, profound question in economics. This thing was created out of nothing by someone that none of us, we don't know who that person is. And yet it has value on the market, and that value has been increasing steadily for over a decade. It's a very, very interesting question. And so I tried to wrap my head around that for several years. And then eventually I thought I had a pretty good answer. And I kept getting questions from friends and family like, why are you into Bitcoin? Why are you so obsessed with this thing? And it really started in the beginning of 2017, the bull market. If you guys remember, the price sort of crossed 1,000, and us true believers were like, yes, this is it. We go to the moon. And I started getting a lot of inbound questions, and I thought maybe I should write something, because I don't want to answer each of these questions individually. It'd be much easier to just send people to a link and say, read this. These are my thoughts. And so I started writing, and very, very slow writer. I was writing maybe a sentence a day.
No ChatGPT.
No ChatGPT. And I had just had my first child, and I was working, and eventually finished the article and published it in early 2018 as the bull market ended. And it got a much bigger reception than I ever imagined. And it was translated by volunteers into a lot of different languages, and then I eventually turned it into a book. So yeah, that's my background.
Well, let's do a room check real quick. How many people have been in Bitcoin more than 10 years? Oh, good amount. How many have been in less than 2 years? Okay, so we got a bunch of people in the middle there, that class of question, right? And what is a Bitcoiner that we were talking about last night? That's kind of where my thought process has been the last year or so, is to start to ask the question of what is a Bitcoiner, what is a Bitcoin company, why in 2015, 16, when I was going to meetups and there was 100 people, I'm like, wow, someday this is going to be 1,000 people, 5,000 people. And apart from the Bitcoin conference, which is this festival environment, the local meetups have kind of stayed about the same size. There's these early adopters that have said like, yeah, we're totally into Bitcoin. I gave you the example last night from Jeffrey Moore's Technology Lifetime Adoption Cycle book, where he talks about PCs. And my first PC, I had to buy the motherboard, the hard drive, put jumpers, cables, and all this stuff. And when Dell and IBM and Acer said, we're going to make a vanilla box you can't open, we're like, who's ever going to buy a vanilla box you can't open? Right? Of course, we were wrong, and that's what became the early majority, was just a tool you can use. So why do you think that the early adopter phase kind of stagnated or maybe over, and why won't everyone be an early adopter?
Yeah, that's a super interesting question. I think it's the real early adopters find ideological affinity with the new technology, and they really nerd out, and it sort of speaks to their identity. I mean, that's true for me. I'm a libertarian, and this was like, wow, I couldn't change the world through politics. That didn't work. And I was like, maybe I can change the world through technology. And in the early days, I mean, there's a lot of people in this room, I can see some of them who felt that way, who really felt like we can fix the world by creating money that can't be tampered with. But you're right, Ed. I think, as you get into the early majority and late majority, the people who are adopting Bitcoin, they don't have this kind of affinity, ideological affinity. And I think this is true really for all technologies, whether it's the internet or the microwave. Like, I don't look at my microwave and like, oh my God, this is so cool. I just want to talk about this. No, most people will come to Bitcoin because it solves a real problem in their life. And they will be reminded over and over again by the people around them that this is an important problem. And I talked about this a little bit on Twitter, where I said there's this idea of touch points, which is the number of people who talk about something before you look into it. And that's true for the early adopters as well. I had people who told me about Bitcoin before I was interested in it. It took a few people saying, you really need to pay attention to this before I went and actually looked into it and devoted enough time that I was like, actually, maybe I should put some of my savings into Bitcoin. And I think that's going to be true as well for the early majority, but they're not going to dive in with the same kind of passion that people like you and me had. They're just going to be like, I can't buy as much. My salary is not buying as much food at the grocery store anymore. And I keep hearing from my friends, whether it's playing bridge or playing pickleball, they keep mentioning this thing, Bitcoin. Maybe I should go look into it because I feel something's wrong. Like I feel poorer. And this has certainly been true over the last few years. We had this huge bout of inflation in the US. And I think that focused a lot of minds on like, what is the solution? And it caused all sorts of problems because when money is being debased, it sort of forces people to go and look for opportunities to do something with their money. And it creates more consumerism, it creates more speculation. So we had this GameStop phenomena, right? We had people who were speculating in GameStop. People are just looking for something to do with their money because it's melting. But the real solution is something like Bitcoin, which provides ultimate scarcity, verifiable, and can be transported across the world as easily as an email. So eventually people will come to this because they just have to, not because they have some strong libertarian desire to fix the world. I mean, if we all believe in mass adoption, we have to get comfortable with the idea that people who we strongly disagree with are going to adopt Bitcoin.
That path to Bitcoin is really interesting because I've never met anyone that had the exact same journey through Bitcoin. My initial introduction was that famous 2011 Gawker article, right, which says you can buy stuff on the dark web. I'll let you make your own assumptions what I saw in the beauty of that. But, I bought 200 Bitcoin, $6. I tried to figure out the dark web. And even working at IBM, I couldn't figure out the dark web, and so I forgot about it, whatever. Those first years were just gambling. It was speculation, right? It was just like, ooh, it's going up, it's going down. And then Michael Tidwell of Atlanta, I said, I need to understand this better. Let's do a code review. And I paid him half a Bitcoin for 2 hours to show me the code review. But being an ex-coder, I went through that code and I saw the whole way it works. I'm like, holy crap, this is like sanctimonious. This is like perfect code. This is beautiful in the code itself. Moved to Amsterdam 2017, 2018, where it was much more the libertarian, the what can we do to change the world. And then you get back to Bitcoin conference and the festival, and then you get into Mara, where it's just people going hash rate, hash rate, hash rate, hash rate, hash rate. They're all Bitcoiners, right? And so talk to like why you and I both believe that your path is your path. Part of Bitcoin that you're interested in is fine. There is no, you don't have to be a maxi. Maybe the early majority or the future of being a Bitcoiner is different for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I hope eventually, my family all adopts Bitcoin, and they're not like hardcore maxis. They're not libertarian. Most people don't care about those issues. They care about their everyday lives. Their kids are going to school, they're working at their job. Those are the day-to-day concerns. And one thing we discussed, Ed, is that even in these Bitcoin companies, the thing that might surprise you guys is the majority of people, they're not Bitcoiners, which is surprising, right? Like MicroStrategy, I mean, Michael Saylor is like a very prominent Bitcoiner, but probably, you could speak to this, the vast majority of people there don't care that much about Bitcoin, like all the ideology that goes with Bitcoin. They probably keep some of their savings in Bitcoin. And I think that's going to be true for most investors. It's just going to be a part of their portfolio. And I think that's okay. I think that's fine. I think one thing I'm hopeful for is that it will change some people over time. I have seen when people adopt Bitcoin, a sort of change in mindset towards more future orientation. I don't know if that's going to be true for everyone, but I've seen it enough to know it's not a coincidence. To know that people who used to be sort of consumerist and spend a lot and didn't think much about the future, start thinking more about savings and start thinking like, hey, this part of my portfolio is growing a lot. Let me figure out why. Oh, this thing is scarce. Okay, so maybe I can defer some of my consumption and put it into Bitcoin because I'll have more savings in the future, and then I can do something that I wanted to do. Maybe it's I can buy a house, or maybe it's I can buy a car, or maybe I can afford a kid now. And I've seen that a lot. So I do have some hope, even though I don't think there'll be a lot of people who have that ideological connection to Bitcoin's origins, its cypherpunk origins. I do think it'll have beneficial effects on the world in general.
Yeah. That whole question of what's a Bitcoin company, right? Even at Mara, the Bitcoin technicians, they just focus on those miners and the racks and the energy grid. And then when you start talking about the libertarian stuff or the ordinals or whatever part of it, they just get this blank stare on their face because that's their Bitcoin. A couple of the questions that I've developed to ask people in the last year or so was, if Michael Saylor had said, we're going to become a diamond treasury company, would you expect the employees to then learn how to grade diamonds and know everything about the diamond market and wear diamonds all the time? Probably not. So what is it about being a Bitcoin treasury company or Coinbase as a Bitcoin or exchange compels the people to then become Bitcoiners? If you work for Waste Management, do you have to be really into trash collection? If you worked at the Boy Scouts of America, can you hate kids? It's these questions that I think people like Vijay and I that have been in this a long time, we're just waiting every month to see what the next questions are. I often joke that you only have to go into a coma for about a month to come out of it and see that Bitcoin has completely changed again. It's just that quick of how things are moving. Where do you see, because when you look at Eric Semler and Simon and Dylan LeClaire, a year and a half ago, they weren't even talking about being a treasury company, and now we've got 170 of them. I mean, that's all anybody's talking about now. And 3 years ago, ordinals wasn't even a thing until Tracy Rodamore said, I'm going to make ordinals. What are some things that you see coming down the pipeline in terms of where Bitcoin may be going? And along with that, is Trump a Bitcoiner, right? Do you consider what he's doing on Strategic Bitcoin Reserve and his own personal holdings? Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on a political hot seat, but as an example of an early majority, right? Where do you think the puck is going?
No, I do not think Trump is a Bitcoiner, but I think he's politically very savvy, and I think he could sort of sense the change in direction of the wind and realize that this is a really important political demographic. And I want to go on a slight tangent. I think one thing that was a huge risk for Bitcoin that I always talked about, and I thought whenever I explained Bitcoin to people and they were thinking about investing, I need to tell them this risk, is nation-state attack. And I said this question of it, that the US government or other governments attacking Bitcoin is still unresolved. And I think it's going to be resolved in the next 5 or so years. I believe that question has now been resolved. I think Trump coming to the Bitcoin conference and bending the knee effectively by saying everything we wanted to hear. He said everything we wanted to hear, right? I will free Ross Ulbricht. I will fire Gary Gensler. I'm going to do a strategic Bitcoin reserve. I mean, there wasn't really any major thing that we wanted that he didn't say. And I think that marked a sea change, that now Bitcoin has political capture. And so I think politicians like Trump will recognize that. Maybe there are some who are sort of on the other end ideologically, like Elizabeth Warren, will go to their graves opposing Bitcoin. But I think now you will see all of the pragmatic politicians, which is, I think, the vast majority of people in Congress are mostly pragmatist in the sense that they just want to get reelected. They will recognize this sea change and say, okay, the population, there is enough of the population who cares enough about this that we have to now pander to it. And I think that's a really important shift in the market that's happened in the last year. Sorry, that was a bit of a tangent. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, where do you see the puck going? I mean, there's a peer-to-peer cash system. Payments still, Lightning is great, it works, but it's not a payment system yet. It's not a medium of exchange. It is a good store of value. We've kind of proven that case out. I think that one's pretty well established. There's the privacy effects of the network and anonymity and all these other factors. You being a thought leader and now writing your second book, where's the puck going? What should we expect to see in the next year or so?
Yeah, I think the puck is going where I thought it was going when I started writing my article in 2017, which is money goes through this evolution. Money does not start out de novo as a medium of exchange. That was the big misconception in the early days of Bitcoin, and I think it was the cause of the block size war, that you had all these people in the Bitcoin community who were like, Bitcoin is money, and so we need to see it at grocery stores. And they went around to like merchants and they were like, you need to adopt Bitcoin, it's great. And it's cheaper than credit cards. And what they found, it was incredibly difficult to get merchants to adopt Bitcoin. Why was it difficult? It was difficult because no one had any savings in Bitcoin. Why would a baker or a butcher or a candlestick maker, why would they accept Bitcoin if none of their customers come in and say, I want to pay in Bitcoin? So money has to transition through this evolution. All money start out as collectible. That was true of gold. And then they slowly but surely, as more and more people desire them, become a store of value. First, an incipient store of value, that is, just a few people value it. And then as more people recognize it and more people say, I want to keep savings in it, it becomes a deeply established store of value. And that's what gold is. Gold is a deeply established store of value. It's valued all around the world. If you have a gold coin, you can sell it pretty much anywhere on earth. Bitcoin is going through that stage right now. It's becoming a deeply established store of value. And in many ways, many respects, I think Bitcoin is becoming more liquid than gold. Like, you can sell a lot of Bitcoin and not move the price very much. It's remarkable. Just, a week or two ago, someone sold 80,000 Bitcoin and really didn't move the price that much. So I think Bitcoin is in that stage now. Eventually, you get mass ownership. Everyone has some Bitcoin. The early majority, then the late majority. And then you get the transition into medium of exchange, where everyone does have savings, and then you go to the local merchant. It's not a hard sell. You should accept Bitcoin because everyone who lives in this neighborhood has some Bitcoin, and that's the final transition. That process could take a while. That could take decades, I think. But the puck is going in that direction. And the direction is first mass adoption and then eventually medium of exchange and also global unit of account. And that the last stage, the puck will end in the goal when everyone thinks in terms of Bitcoin. When you go to the baker and you're like, a loaf of bread is 50 Satoshis. That's the end state.
Okay, we're going to do one more topic here, and then we'll get some questions, but it's going to be kind of a hot take, and I want to hear your thoughts on it. It's the one I talked to you about last night. Being deeply involved in these treasury companies, I came to learn that nothing the treasury companies are doing really has anything to do with Bitcoin. It's really about a pristine asset, whether it was gold or diamonds or real estate or whatever. The back end of it is just creative financial engineering. It's all based upon this pristine asset going up and up and up, or the dollar going down and down, or the peso, or whatever you want to talk about. And I got into it with ChatGPT, and I just did one of these sessions where I'm like, okay, I'm going to break the silicon overlords. They're going to teach me what's going on here. And it finally came back to me, and it said, this is exactly the same thing that happened with Galileo, Copernicus, and gravity, and Darwin and evolution. And I cannot remember his name, but the guy with germ theory. And it was that they had a truth they discovered, but the incentive systems of the existing hierarchy said, yeah, we don't want to hear that. The church didn't want to hear about the earth not being at the center. The doctors didn't want to hear they've been killing patients by not washing their hands. The church didn't want to hear about creation not being true. Don't comment. And so it got me thinking of like, well, if that's true, well then Bitcoin is not a technology. It's not a toy. It's as big a deal as gravity, as germ theory, as evolution. This is something so big and so true. And then you get back to the code and you're like, well, what does the code do? It does what it's gonna do. It doesn't care. So if Bitcoin is just producing blocks, everything else is a reaction to it. And so when people say, oh, Bitcoin price is going up because of ETFs, because of this, I wonder if that's not totally true. It's that Bitcoin is doing what it's doing, and everybody else is reacting to this perfect sound money, which makes it bigger than us. And that's the resistance, because Wall Street and DC are like, no. We control the money. And when you say, no, you don't, that screws with their incentives. Thoughts? Sorry, just dropped a bomb on you.
Yeah, that's a big question. I do like the idea that Bitcoin is a discovery. And I think that's kind of true of mathematics as well. I don't think it's the right way to think of mathematics as we invent mathematics. I think we discover it. And I think Bitcoin is a discovery. We discovered money, in a sense, gold, just by kind of playing with collectibles, and it sort of evolved into this thing which is foundational to human civilization. If we don't have money, we don't have a division of labor, we don't have productivity, we're all just kind of living in villages, eking out an existence. And we discovered money, and I think Bitcoin is just the discovery of better money. In terms of these kind of trends and whether they have their own sort of dynamic, I kind of agree with that as well. I think one of the things I wrote in my book is that there's this inherent social dynamic to the process of monetization. And this is true for Bitcoin, and it's true for gold as well. This kind of like Gartner hype cycle where people are slowly but surely adopting it, and then slowly but surely get into the speculative phase where other people realize, hey, this is going up steadily, I'm going to speculate on that. And then it starts to get parabolic, and then you get the feeding frenzy and the madness of crowds, and then you get a crash. I think it's absolutely fascinating because we've never seen the process of monetization happen in real time before. The process of gold being monetized took thousands of years. So we get to see this happening in front of our eyes, and to see that there is a social dynamic to it, I think is like one of the great discoveries of economics. And I think I agree with you that it's these external factors don't matter as much as the social dynamic. And another way I say it is like in a bull market, bad news doesn't matter. And in a bear market, good news doesn't matter. The social dynamic is driving the monetization.
Yeah, and this is the take that people disagree with me on, and we'll find out in a year from now if I'm hiding somewhere because I was wrong or maybe I was right. But I kind of feel that with the code and the math doing what it does, and when people say this time is different, I love this time is different because in 2018 that probably cost me about $1 million. In 2022 it cost me a few $1 million. Like, this time is different, right? It's going to be different this time. And now they're saying the same thing about next year. We're in a super cycle, and there's all this institutional money. It's different. And my argument is it can't be. It can't be different, because that would be akin to Earth taking a lap around Jupiter, right? It's like, that doesn't happen. That's not the way gravity works. Or a creature appearing out of nowhere because that's what God wanted. No, it has to follow the path of evolution. And so, I know I did it again, I'm sorry. But it's that level of a discovery of sound money where fiat didn't work and barter didn't work, right? And now we got to that penultimate place. One more comment on that, and then we'll go to questions, or you don't want to touch that one?
I'll stay away from that one.
Excellent. Okay, well, we could go on forever, but we're going to give you guys 10 minutes here to ask some questions of Vijay or myself, or mostly Vijay. Take a mic. Oh, he's bringing you a mic because it's being recorded. Hey, Rizzo.
Hi, everybody. Since you're kind of talking about the future, and you mentioned possibly a number of decades for certain things to come to being, could you speculate on what it might be like for kids to be Bitcoin native? Like now we see kids who are internet native, and they're going to be AI native. So what does Bitcoin native look like?
I mean, it's a good question. I just think of them using it for their day-to-day needs in the way they use money now. They get paid their allowance. I mean, I'm sure there are some parents in here who are already paying their kids' allowance in Bitcoin. I have some friends who do that. And eventually they'll be thinking about, like, I can spend this. I think right now, most people, including the children I know who have Bitcoin, think of it as an investment. They don't think of it as much as money, and they're not using it as money. But I think that will happen in time. So that's kind of a transition I see happening over decades.
Yeah, I would add on to that it's much easier for them because they don't have 50 years, 100 years with the dollar. You go to Argentina, you go to Venezuela, you go to Zimbabwe, and they're like, we get it, we're in, you know. But a lot of times Argentinians will be like, well, I've got everything in dollars, I'm okay. And you're like, but the peso's screwed up, right? And they're like, yeah, but I'm okay with dollars. Our kids look at it and they don't have that connection to the dollar. And so they see Bitcoin and they're like, well, that money makes more sense. So it's much easier for them to just accept Bitcoin as the better money.
Or gold. And one comment I like to make is you can look at the trends of kids today and sort of predict the future. You can see the future in the present if you have a keen enough eye. And I mean, how many kids under, say, 15 care about or own gold or want to talk about gold? I mean, to me, that's the most obvious bullish case for Bitcoin, is that Bitcoin is just going to completely replace gold. I mean, the story from it replacing gold to becoming a reserve currency and becoming a medium of exchange, that's more complex and harder to tell. But the next 10x for Bitcoin, to me, is such an easy, compelling, obvious story. Like, I don't know anyone under 20 who ever talks about gold. I know a lot of kids under 20 who talk about Bitcoin and digital money.
I got to put a plug for my kids. My son, William, my 12-year-old, he keeps all his wealth in Robux, which I don't think is the best choice. But anyway.
Hey Ed, hey Vijay. My name is Jeff Tiefenthaler, and it's just great to be here with you both today. I just want to say a couple things before I ask a question. The first is, Vijay, I put you up there with the great educators, the Bitcoin educators, including Andreas Antonopoulos and the people who were really helping to shed light on the significant importance of Bitcoin in 2017 and 2018, because that's when I got into Bitcoin. And at that time, there was a lot of noise. We had the ICO boom. The price had just gone from 1,000 to 20,000. And your article, The Bullish Case for Bitcoin, that you have pinned on your X account, I've probably shared with maybe 100 people. And so thank you so much for doing what you do and providing that kind of free education for people to understand that Bitcoin is money.
I really appreciate that. It's strange for me because I'm kind of an introvert by nature, and hearing people say that really makes me feel really great. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
I mean it. I definitely mean that. I think a lot of people conflate money with just a medium of exchange. And in your article, you do a really good job going through the different features of what money is. Its durability, its divisibility, its fungibility, its scarcity. And so if you haven't read that article, I really encourage everybody in here to
Actually, buy the book. It's better than the article.
Okay, well, yeah, buy the book. But let me get around to my question. It's a little bit of a tangent, but I know that you're an advisor right now for a company called Savannah. Can you talk a little bit more? Because in the opening session, one of the questions that came up was affordability, and people just don't have capital. And I think a big reason for that is because their money is tied up in real estate. So can you talk a little bit about that company, where you guys are currently at, if you guys have already been working with customers today and are helping them get onto a Bitcoin standard and a Bitcoin savings plan?
Well, I appreciate that question. I promise that was not planted. I feel like last year there was a question like this. It was about my book, and I felt like it was suspicious and people would think I planted that question. I didn't plant that one. So a friend of mine who I have a lot of respect for, and was actually the person who orange-pilled me, back in 2011 and 12, started this company because he had this insight that there are a lot of people who feel Bitcoin poor. That is, I want more Bitcoin, but they don't have cash around. They don't have savings to get more Bitcoin. But on the other hand, the vast majority of Americans have most of their savings, if they have any savings, in their house, in the equity of their house. But their house is illiquid, right? And they live in it and they don't want to get rid of their house. They don't want to sell their house. So what he came up with was this idea that you could use the equity in your house to get Bitcoin exposure. And what the company does is it says, if you have $100,000 of equity in your house, you can use a portion of that, about 70%, so let's say $70,000, to go out and they will buy Bitcoin for you and they will share in the upside of the Bitcoin. So this is great for people who just don't feel like they don't have money to get more Bitcoin. The other great thing about this product is there's no monthly payment, there's no interest, there's nothing like this. There's no obligation, right? One thing you could do if you wanted is go and get a mortgage against your house and buy Bitcoin, but then you have a mortgage and you have to make monthly payments, and if you can't service the debt, then you can't do it. So this is a way to get more Bitcoin exposure without putting a bigger financial burden on yourself. And the idea is it's a 10-year term, and if Bitcoin is up over 10 years, I think most of us believe it will be up after 10 years, then you share in the upside of the Bitcoin. If it's down, then you have to use some of the home equity to help make the company whole. So this company, where it's at now, is that they have a long waiting list of people who want to use this product. The idea is very, very popular, and they're in the process of raising money, and I think they're very, very close to getting a big fundraising round, and then they're just going to go to this list of people who have said, I want to use your product, and start buying Bitcoin for them, keeping it in cold storage, and just waiting 10 years to share the upside with them. So I feel very confident that they're going to get funding, because I think this is an idea whose time has come, because there are a lot of us who have equity in our home, and a lot of us, even me, I feel Bitcoin poor, who would love to use this product. So I don't like advocating for anything that I don't have extreme conviction in. The only thing I've ever advocated for publicly is Bitcoin. I've never got into shitcoins, never really advocated for any company. I do like supporting companies that are Bitcoin only, and I feel like this is a company that could help. The space is good for Bitcoin, and I have a lot of trust in the integrity of the CEO. That's why I said yes to being an advisor. Thank you for the question, though.
Yeah, and I'd recommend Leon Wankum. You can look him up. He does a lot of articles for Bitcoin Magazine. His book's coming up. He's a German real estate guy who's liquidating his whole family portfolio of real estate for Bitcoin. But Leon Wankum does some amazing work on talking about real estate and Bitcoin and what they mean to each other. We got, 2 minutes there? Yeah, one minute, sorry. So why don't we do closing thoughts? What I'll say is, whatever your journey in Bitcoin is, whatever it means to you, run with that. Don't let any maxi or person that's deeper into Bitcoin make you feel ashamed or something because you don't know that part of Bitcoin. Just do what feels good to you about Bitcoin, dive into it, go down the rabbit hole. And when you try to orange pill people, which I think orange pilling is over, I think orange pilling in the sense of the true becoming a maxi, diving into it. I think everybody is here that's done that. This next phase of the early majority is going to be a lot different. And if that just means somebody's buying it and putting it into their River account, or they get really into mining, so be it. But we've got to be there to support them, hold to the truths of Bitcoin, the truth to the code, and just know that we were there early and bask in the wealth.
I think that's a great way to end it. Thanks, Ed.
Thank you very much.